You distributed the minutes? Okay. So everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes?
I make a motion that we accept the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
The secretary report, I try to put out the next 4 in sequence meetings. There was a problem with the November date. It is November 16th. All our meetings are the 3rd Monday of the month, save for January and February when it becomes the 4th Monday of the month because they have holidays. I guess my question is for the December 21st meeting, is that going to be a problem? That is that's the beginning of Christmas week, so I don't know if anybody will be traveling, going anywhere. I mean, we can change it, but if anybody has a problem, let us know. Anyone else? It's going to be up to the chair if you think maybe we should cancel it. We can make a decision, I guess, sometime.
I guess we
in
can
November.
get closer. I feel like if we move it further out, then we'll have the same problem. Well, why don't we as we get closer, we'll get a consensus with the commissioners and the staff.
And that will be the secretarial report.
Okay. I hope you all received an email from me today about scheduling an orientation meeting, a commissioner orientation meeting. I know for some of us it's long overdue, for some of us it's probably about time, and for some of us it will be a great refresher. Kelvin and I talked about this, and we know that there will be a new administration in the beginning of the year. We don't quite know what will happen with the new administration. We think that the commission will remain in some configuration, and we can talk about the conversations that we've had. But it seemed that we need to have an orientation, and we'll see what happens in the new year. So we would have an abbreviated orientation just to kind of get us all a little bit on the same page. To that end, we thought that a weekday orientation might be helpful. It's hard to get folks out on Saturday, and as we get into November and December, I somehow think between the weather and the holidays it becomes a little bit more difficult. To that end, I sent out this doodle poll, which hopefully is easy to use, that essentially I was suggesting, after consulting with Kelvin, the Tuesdays and Thursdays throughout November. So let me start with, did everyone get that?
I may have, I didn't say it.
Okay. Okay. So for now, it seems that 4 of us are available on Tuesday the 24th, which is probably 2 days before Thanksgiving. How does that seem to folks? Do you want to either commit to that date or look at that doodle poll, look at the dates I proposed when you get back to your computers and vote that way? Would that be better than to suggest we just call it a day now?
How many people?
4 people have responded, so there's only one date for which all 4 of us are available.
Tuesday before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
It's okay with me.
It's also okay with me.
I can't do Tuesdays. So,
Okay.
That was one of our new members.
We should adjust to.
well, I don't want to just, everybody else is good on that other.
I'll tell you what, let's do this then. Let's go back to the doodle poll. If folks would try to take a look at it, and we will work on getting the consensus for a meeting, hopefully sometime Tuesday or Thursday in November.
Commissioner, what's your availability? Just Tuesdays bad?
Mondays and Thursdays are great for me.
What about the Monday before the regular meeting in November? Is that a problem?
The night.
The 16th, I think, we have it?
So you mean a longer session, as it were? That could work.
Is that Monday?
Yeah.
It's a Monday.
And how does it work in space? Your space here.
We could probably work that out.
Okay.
If they don't have an event here, I'm sure they would. use this one, sure.
Okay.
I mean, we can have
Just
it in
thinking
lieu
we'll
of the
check with
meeting.
Sure, absolutely.
All right.
I'll check.
Are you,
I mean, we can have it in lieu of our meeting. Sarah's usually hard for you to get here earlier, isn't it?
I can do
From work?
early that day.
all right, so why don't we, because in case we have to end up canceling the one around Christmas, why don't we call for it 4 to 6 instead of 3 to 5? And then we'll lead into this meeting, and depending on what Calvin thinks about other guests that may be attending, we'll decide what we need to do with actually having the meeting. So, Monday, November 16th, 4 o'clock, 4 to 6, orientation in this room. We'll be sure to let Bishop Bronson know by phone, rather than email. MUG.
Yeah, Majid.
Okay.
I'll let you know.
Perfect. All right, well, very good, very good. The other thing is, so Kelvin was planning to go over some of the police department directives. Some of that may not be new for some of the commissioners. What else, and I know this is kind of a broad question, but what else would you like to hear about? You're planning directives, a little bit of the organizational history.
Sort of just a brief overview of oversight around the country, what different models are, things like that. Like you said, I'm thinking of this as really an abbreviated version of what we've normally done with new commissioners, which usually spanned 4 or 5 hours or a day after a new session. I think it does make sense to wait and see what happens into the new year. We might get some additional appointments on the first and second.
So we're envisioning doing this abbreviated on directives and kind of relevant pieces of history to enable us to kind of do our work now, and then a longer session with new members in the new year.
And given that a number of the directives have changed significantly since DOJ has come in, so this is actually an appropriate time for that.
Great. And then that gives you enough time, sorry, to put it all together. Here's your month.
And could you check, Calvin, and see when the next civilian police academy thing is? I know the chair and I went,
Sure.
and certainly for our 2 retired police officers, they don't have to go.
Right.
But maybe we can at least find out when that might be scheduled, and we'll see if we can get any of the commissioners to go.
Do that.
It was kind of fun, I enjoyed it.
Normally they do it in the fall, like, I think we probably already had it this year, but I'll check with them.
Thanks. All right, well, good. That was a good suggestion, Sarah. I'm glad that we have a date set. The other 2 things that I wanted to draw our attention to is some of the material that Kelvin sent out. So there were 2 pieces, one by David Gambacourt in Philly Magazine, that really talked about Commissioner Ramsey's struggles. And I think that if there's ever a question as to, why can't the Police Advisory Commission just come in and fix Philadelphia? That magazine piece is really the answer. When you look at an officer like Commissioner Ramsey and the challenges that he's facing because of the strong hand of the FOP, and then related to that, the strong hand of the collective bargaining agreement, and it's quite difficult. So I think I recommend that to all of you.
Is there any interest in writing the response or anything about that?
I think that we can always put our opinion out. I'm not sure, have you looked at it?
I haven't.
Oh.
No,
Yeah.
I will.
Yes, yeah, please do. I don't know what we would be saying other than, yeah.
I was thinking about that. I think it might be appropriate to wait until we see who the new police commissioner is, and then try to write something probably early next year. Because by then, we would have had some experience with the new material that we're receiving. I will have gone to probably at that point 3 firearms review board meetings, so we have a much better sense of where we're going. I think we might have more to tell the public at that point. Things are still pretty much in flux now as we're trying to get ourselves into this new role. We have a lot of new responsibilities. We're not any money, but that's another question. I'm thinking maybe early next year would probably be the absolutely best point to do that.
Good. And we believe that who will be the next commissioner? Is there a short list, a very short list?
Well, it's a short list. It does seem to be Richard Ross by most estimations. A few people I've talked to inside the department seem to believe that as well. So and certainly that's what Commissioner Ramsey is steering towards. Just musing on it, I suppose it's probably difficult for Kenny to choose someone externally at this point. There's one less headache for him if he chooses Ross, quite honestly. So.
Do you gentlemen know him? Or any of you know him?
I know well.
Yeah, I mean, we worked with Rich Ross closely when he was head of internal affairs. He's been head of pretty much every command, every major command in the department. He's clearly, more than qualified for the position. I've worked well with him when he was at IEDs.
Great. The other piece I can come with the summer reading list is the piece that was in the Inquirer about the change in the directives that will allow the Police Advisory Commission access to officer-involved shootings. I think that the story did a great job of explaining the change and how important the change is. Have you heard any feedback from that?
Not any official feedback. I mean, I've heard, the folks who I've talked to inside the department seem to be pleased with the change, honestly. I've talked to, he said, we're eager for you to participate. I had a great conversation with Deputy Commissioner Coulter, who chairs the Firearms Review Board. She told me what to expect. I asked her about, what training would be necessary, things like that. So I'm looking forward to it, and the department seems to be amenable to it. So I'm pleased. I think this is a huge step forward.
Great. And finally, Kelvin and I both had an opportunity to talk to somebody who's on Penny's not transition team, because they're not so presumptuous as to assume he'll be the next mayor. So they're kind of the planning, should he become the next mayor team. And they, what we both heard was a lot of support from the councilman for the Police Advisory Commission, and that they completely understand the idea that there's this unfunded mandate and that you're poised to do some great stuff, you just need more resources. So the conversation I had was very upbeat and very positive.
Likewise. No, she had seen what the mayor's office does is we filled out a transition report a few months ago. They make that available to all the candidates. So Melissa Bailey could do the same thing. She can come in and review those documents and question us too if she wants. So it's not like we're playing favorites or anything. And she showed a lot of knowledge about the commission, and her, she came in saying, what can we do to help? So just her attitude and the Kenny folks' attitude that I've talked to has all been very positive.
So we'll see what happens in the new year.
See if there's some dollars to it.
That's right. All right, very good. You have a report for us?
I sure do. So we've got, we're at 25 complaints so far this year. We had 12 at this point last year, so we're about running about twice what we did then. Still fairly low. We have 46 open complaint investigations between our two investigators. Internal Affairs has 40 new complaints so far in October. They've got a total of 614 citizens complaints this year. That's a little more than last year at this time, about 5%. We have two final reports in two cases that are slated for closing that I'm going to provide you all shortly by email. In addition to those full investigations, we've got 137 audits as described in the next paragraph. One of the things also that we're going to begin doing is the department is now providing additional information on their website about crime in neighborhoods. Previous to this, they only provided the Part 1 crimes, which would be homicides, aggravated assaults, and such. Now they've expanded the amount of public data that they're providing to include burglaries, robberies, other Part 2 crimes, which is really excellent. One of the things we're going to be doing with the from a request from the folks in the 19th district. They wanted a 5-year run of all of the crimes that have happened in their district, so they can kind of sit down and look at them. I put together a report, a district level report for them. I'm going to go out and talk with the pastor who requested that information, and at some point I'm going to take that out and just show that all to them and go over it with them, in addition to all the information we've gathered on complaints and other types of information in their district. I think that's a good blueprint for when we do district level meetings. We can go in and have a very clear snapshot of this is the crime in your neighborhood, this is the areas, much like a ComStat meeting, except we're going to tailor this to what citizens want. This is the crime in your area, these are the police complaints in your area, shootings, etc. Just to kind of get people involved in a little bit more back and forth, knowing where the crime happens in their area, so they can actually ask better questions of their police commanders when they go to those meetings. The 19th district is a good place to start because those folks have worked very well with Captain Bologna in that district. So I'm looking forward to really working with them in detail, really digging into some of the metrics of what's happening in their area.
Kelvin, in addition to giving folks the breakdown on the crime area, will there be any information about resolution?
In terms,
So,
in terms of,
this many, there are this many calls, this many complaints, this many arrests.
Mhm. Yeah, we can, actually we can do that. I'd have to dig a little bit deeper for that because the department right now only releases the front end. These are the cases that have come up, and I don't know what the dispositions are necessarily, but we could do that, yeah.
Because I know we've gone out into the community before, and people have talked about, and they're not necessarily within the PAC charge, but they've talked about drug houses in the neighborhood that they can't get the police to investigate. And so some kind of, and then what happened, I think would be helpful.
Exactly. Council, as I said, was not able to join us tonight. We met last week with a representative from the law department. We requested the additional records on police arbitrations to add to our annual report. So we're talking with the law department about exactly what information within those reports is permitted to be released publicly. If you'll recall, the last set of arbitrations the department released were unredacted at all. They actually sent out the entire reports on the arbitrations. There's some concern, however, that obviously we don't want to get involved in any kind of litigation with the FOP around this. So we want to take a close look at what's actually in the arbitrations to make sure we're not, if there's some witness name, if there's an address of an officer, which I've never seen in an arbitration report actually, or any other personal identifying information that would be exempt under other state laws. We want to make sure not to run afoul of that as we gather and talk about that information publicly. Most likely we'll have some type of MOU that's similar to the one we already have with the department around shootings. So that's where we're going with that. As our chair mentioned, I'll be attending the first meeting of the Firearms Review Board on November 3rd as a voting member. And we're also working with the department about the protocols that will allow us to respond to shooting scenes as they occur, which again I think is a major step forward for the commission and for transparency and oversight in the city in general. We received, also in connection with that, we received just last week 8 more completed discharge reports from 2014 and 2015 for our review. We now have 12 of those reports on the table. If anybody wants to see any of that material, please let me know. I can make it available in our office at this time. A couple of those other new cases also have body camera footage too, which we're paying close attention to get a sense of how that actually plays out. The Department of Justice was in town yesterday. They entered the second phase of the shooting review, which means they're working closely with the department as the department changes its directives, alters the training, and does everything to make good on the recommendations that are out there. One of the things they've asked us to do is give them a report, give them feedback on what our experience on the firearms review board in responding to shootings is. Obviously, that's going to take a few months as we start to do that. I suspect we'll be reporting to them probably by the end of December, because one of the things they're doing is they're expanding their review by probably another 6 months, because they're seeing that it's taking the department a lot longer than it took Las Vegas to actually put these things into play. We're a much bigger jurisdiction. We have a lot more wheels turning, a lot of things to change. So DOJ has recognized that, and they're actually going to extend their time here in the city probably by another 6 months. That means the second interim report that says, okay, this is what the department has done and this is what we think of it, will likely come out sometime in January. And I think their thinking there is, again, they want to get buy-in from whoever the new administration is. So it makes sense for them to not release that report now, just wait until the new administration comes out and release it. Okay, we the entire staff went to the NACO conference on October 4th through October 8th, all four of us, yes indeed. And what you have here is this is a summary of all the various sessions in the conference. I'm going to send you guys a link to all of that material so you can leaf through it at your leisure. There's a lot of good information there on any number of aspects of what we do: police misconduct, prosecutions, what makes an effective board and commission, police tactics. I chaired session number 13 on emerging technology implications for oversight. Fantastic conference all the way around. As always, very exciting to talk to other people in this business. There were roughly 500 people at this conference. That's about 100 or almost 150 more than there have been in the past. So oversight is expanding around the country in the wake of Ferguson. I don't think anybody's particularly surprised by that. We had a lot of newer, smaller jurisdictions who are either at the ground level of putting oversight into play, or some who have had oversight now for about a year or so are now just sending their board members and their staff people to learn from the rest of us around the country. So we had a great conference. And if anyone from staff wants to pipe in about their experience, please do.
I
Joe?
did a lot of tweeting, so
Yes.
you'll see on our Twitter site, different references that were made at different points during the conference. And one of the sessions that I especially liked was the one dealing with the body cam, because you got to see, I actually showed footage, and how it impacted police handling. Because it has more than dealing with just complaints. It also deals with being able to teach later. Like they had one officer, they used that to tell officers, okay, if there's a car with 4 people in it, don't call for backup. Don't be, and other things that you wouldn't think of that come up and that can lead to problems later. It could have been worse, in different in different encounters and all. So by having these, you can kind of be proactive before you get into a situation that escalates into something worse.
Very good. I think you talked also about showing us something on body cams at the orientation meeting.
That'll be a good time maybe to look over some of the footage and some of the cases we have, so you can get a very contemporary view of how the cameras are viewing what they're seeing and how they're playing into the investigations themselves.
I had a question about the body cam.
Yes.
I heard that there's, after like a certain amount of time, like maybe a month, I think it is in Philadelphia, that body cam footage is no longer admissible, or they just kind of delete it off their database to make room for more body cam footage. Is like, do any of you know what the current expiration date of those camera footage, of that camera footage is in the city of Philadelphia?
You're gonna think I planted that question. That's a good question. Funny you should ask.
It seems like a sincere question.
Well, no, you're exactly right. One of the key points, and we did discuss this some last month, but it's certainly appropriate now. One of the key points is how long will Philadelphia save the footage that comes from these cameras? The pilot program that we put into place in the 22nd district only kept the footage for 15 days, but again, the protocol that they developed for that was really limited to the pilot program, so it's difficult to say what the department really is contemplating for the actual policy itself. But clearly 15 days is not going to be enough. Frankly, 30 days is not going to be enough. The ACLU's model policy, I believe, recommends at least a year, if not more, because if the footage is to be, and now that's in instances where the footage is not already being retained in connection with some incident, arrest, use of force, shooting, anything like that. In those instances, it will automatically be preserved for as long as possible. But let's say, for example, I have a complaint that I want to file, and I don't file it until 45 days, 65 days later. We would want that footage from the officer, if it's appropriate for whatever the incident is, to be able to be retained and looked at. One of the things I found in looking at the time it takes from an actual incident to the time people file complaints, it's actually a lot shorter than I thought it was. Most people, 70% of folks, file complaints within 30 days of the original incident, and that's actually a lot tighter than what I thought it would have been originally. Still, we have a 175-day limit for time for cases to be investigated. So at some points, even though a person may have filed a complaint, it may not get assigned and then actually into the hopper of some investigator for some period even beyond that. So clearly we want to think very carefully about how long we want to save this footage. Lawsuits could be even longer. Certainly you've got, 2 years statute of limitations for a lawsuit from an incident date. So again, if we want that footage to be usable in that circumstance, we're going to have to retain it for a lot longer. But that's obviously costly. And just a few things I've heard from the commissioner so far, I'm a little concerned that they're not going to save footage long enough. So we want to make sure. The other big point is, in addition to how long the footage is saved, is when can the officer view the footage in connection with either an incident or a complaint investigation or something like that. Commissioner Ramsey and Commissioner Bratton have both taken the stand that they don't want to play, the quote is, they don't want to play gotcha with the officer, so we're just going to let them view the footage. The problem with that is essentially a legal one. The legal protections that officers have in the major cases are geared towards objective reasonableness and what the officer saw at the moment, not what he changed his report to say from when he viewed the footage. So in the legal, in fact, the one I would tell you to take a look at number 26, section 26 went over this in some detail as we looked at the body camera policies in New York. I believe there's a really good study out of Phoenix, Arizona as well, looking at that. And so there's some question, and this is all still very much up in the air because a lot of jurisdictions are still just formulating their policies and figuring this out. Some of the transit authorities have different policies and approaches toward this, but the key question remains, when do we let officers view this footage, either in advance of writing a report, after writing a report? One of the suggestions that I think that has some merit is to allow an officer to, you have an incident that, I arrest someone, I've got footage, I write my report, then afterwards I view the footage that came from my camera with my supervisor. So if there's a difference in what I originally saw and what I originally wrote and what the supervisor says, then you can adjust the reporting in connection with the supervisor in looking at it. So then it's not like the officer just changed his viewpoint because he saw something different. So there are a number of ways that people are trying to handle this. This is all very much new for everyone here, so I think that's something we got to pay close attention to.
Boy, I can see Nisa Morris redacted report problems with all of that, really. I could just see it coming.
Exactly. So this is not easy stuff by any means, but I think it's important that we weigh in on how this is going to go forward. And the other piece of that again I think is important is that the President's Task Force report and the DOJ, actually even in the last few recommendations, says that the policy around the usage of this technology should be developed in connection with some external output, or input, I'm sorry. And I don't think we've done that at all yet. I don't know anyone who's had any real input into what the department's developing policy is. So that's another area we would have to pay close attention to. In terms of meetings, media appearances, things like that, I've got a list on the back page there.
You're a superstar.
We did, yeah, well, we did we viewed the documentary film Peace Officer back at the end of last month with Chief Nistel from SEPTA, Asa Khalif from Black Lives Matter, journalist Chris Norris, a couple other folks. The exchange actually between Chief Nistel and Asa Khalif from Black Lives Matter was I thought very significant. Dave reported on it well in the story he did about it. I was disappointed that the department did not send a representative there. I mean, I think that was an important moment where we can all discuss these very difficult issues with using a documentary film as a setting instead of some incident that's going on. So I think that was a missed opportunity, frankly, on the part of the department. And I applaud Chief Nistel always because he's constantly showing up and really being part of this. I think that's what, to me, that's what law enforcement leadership needs to do to really get to the meat of the issues that we have now. As Rhonda mentioned, I met with Representative Penny's campaign. It was a very positive meeting, and I continue to provide her with information on where things are going, telling her about what the Justice Department is saying, things like that, just to keep them abreast of what's happening. I moderated the session, as I mentioned earlier, on police use of emerging technologies. We talked all about license plate readers and DNA and evidence and all sorts of stuff like that. Also did a radio interview on the DOJ report last week with Reverend Mark Tyler from Power. I'll be doing another one tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. talking about the changes to the Firearms Review Board and what that means for PAC and for the police department. I did a panel discussion this weekend, this past weekend with the folks from RISE here on youth violence prevention. Not many kids there, but again, still we talk to the folks who show up, and so we did have a very good exchange around a number of issues with kids and police and violence. Attended that with Chief Inspector Dales from the South Division. He told some very interesting stories about how, as a kid, he was actually picked up by someone on highway patrol who he ended up working with years later, who ended up getting fired too after a while. So that was people were very riveted by that very personal testimony from him. And again, much like the documentary film, I was pleased to see in that instance the department took advantage of an opportunity to discuss things face to face in a very human way, to humanize our police officers and show people that they had the same experiences that you do in our streets. So that was very good. Doing a couple data-related things towards the end of this month and in early December. There's a Data and Civil Rights Conference in Washington, D.C. I'm going to present on a panel there, and a similar panel later in December on the future of oversight at University of D.C. Law School in December.
You're busy.
Yep. Well, that's good. And that is my report.
Any questions for Malcolm?
I'm curious what topics you're going to be discussing in your October presentation.
We're going to be talking about mostly how open data is affecting police departments, how you can work with large chunks of data that come out of the police department in terms of, for example, when we went down this road, we took all of the complaints and took a look at them for both what the type of complaint, who the complaint was against, everything except identifying information for the officers and the complainants. Put that together in a database and left it in a form that other people could manipulate and use. And a lot of departments are beginning to do this with more than just their crime data. You know, crime data is something that's pretty much out there, but now they're starting to put out. Baltimore, for example, publishes all of its use of force reports. You can look at any use of force report that any officer has filed. You can look at any complaints. Complaints in around not knowing how many people involved in the various police departments, 18,000 or so, actually shoot each year. So we're going to be talking about how that all operates at a national scale. So that should be a very good conversation.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question. In regards to the videos, when officers are actually allowed to view the videos, what is the policy surrounding, in relation to, with regards to officers involved in shootings, when an officer has to file a report on that shooting?
Now, good question. Now, any critical incident or any incident where there's some use of force that's being examined or shooting, that footage automatically goes in. You download that immediately into the evidence locker or wherever it is they hold it. The officer does not have access to that until the point where I think the investigation actually happens. Once that happens, I think that they can view the footage most likely with their FOP representative. I believe either in preparation for the questioning or at some point in there. Again, that's a very critical point.
I actually work as a private investigator, and when we make apprehensions, we actually have to, in 24 hours, we have to write a report on everything that happened.
Yep.
So, obviously it goes towards where everything is fresh in your mind. Everything is like fresh in your mind, so you can have every single detail and you won't deter from the actual video.
Exactly. Yeah, I think one of the important changes that the Department of Justice has suggested and Commissioner Ramsey has gone along with is doing interviews with officers within 48 hours of the time of the shooting. And then, obviously he has a 72-hour rule, barring some other incident, he's going to be naming the officers, et cetera. So they've really pushed that process forward. I mean, in the past, and I'm sure Bill knows, but there have been large gaps in the time between an incident to when we actually got to question the officer. And that depends in part on the declination by the district attorney's office that they have no prosecuting interest in that particular incident. But the way it's being changed, and this, as you ask this question, I think we're going to go over this in some detail when we do our briefing. What we're trying to do now is split those investigations up so the administrative piece can continue without the actual DA's declination even at that point. So there's still some talk back and forth between the DA's office and internal affairs of the department on how that exactly is going to work. But the idea there is to allow the administrative investigation to proceed in parallel to whatever the DA is doing. But you want to make sure, of course, to balance the officer's rights and things like that in the midst of doing that.
That will be a fight.
Yes. Yes, it is. You're
That will
absolutely
be a
right.
fight if they're going to try and start interviewing shooters before a declination. It was in the past at a small level, but Lynn Abraham, when she was a DA,
Right.
she did not want internal affairs interviewing officers
Right.
until they had issued a declination or decided to make an arrest.
Exactly.
I know Seth was the new DA, and, well, not new, been there now for a while, but I don't know what his feelings are on it.
Yeah, and I think Seth, to some extent, has, when he came into office, you may recall that one of the promises he made was to shorten that time frame because it had gotten ridiculously long under Abraham. I mean, we had some dog shootings where they didn't make a decision until months later, which is, ridiculous. I know that the time frame is short, and I'm not very clear on exactly how short it is now. I think DA's office is doing a much better job. In the couple of jobs that we just got, I've been looking at that, and it seems like they're moving very quickly, actually, now with that declination letter to allow that process to proceed. So it does seem like they've made some improvements even before the DOJ made this recommendation.
And believe me, I was a big critic, Bob, will tell you, of the DA's office and how long it took. But in fairness to them, a lot of it was the police department too, like getting the ballistic reports done, crime reports done, getting medical examiners' reports done, the entire autopsy, and all of the forensic material together before, in fairness to them, before they could make a real decision on where they're going to go with the case. So some of it was internally getting the information to them, and other times they had it and didn't have enough attorneys in their SIU unit who handled all the internal affairs cases. So on top of all the other cases they're handling, now they're getting shootings on top of it, So it was a pretty big workload. So hopefully they have more attorneys there, and that will help cut back on it.
Yeah, it seems like they're doing a better job, but thank you for that detail, because I think one of the things we want to be mindful of as we enter into this new level is to be able to explain how this all works to the public, because I think folks really don't understand all of the different players in the game, and I think being closer to that process now will allow us, and I think it's frankly our responsibility to be able to explain that to the public in the best way. So looking forward to that opportunity.
So our report of council is she's in France.
Conference in France.
Very good. Any old business?
I just noticed the minutes from the previous meeting. I'm not listed as present, I was there, and Commissioner Chowdhury is listed as both present and absent, so.
I'll make the notation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any new business? Public comment?
She asked a loaded question.
She did.
Probably.
Good job.
All right, then I think we are ready to adjourn.